What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest superstars decides she's had enough of being disrespected on live television? What happens when years of built-up frustration finally explode in the most unexpected way possible? Today we're diving into the moment Jennifer Lopez absolutely destroyed Joy Behar on The View, leading to one of the most shocking exits in daytime television history. This is a story about power, respect, and what happens when someone finally fights back. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe how this unfolds. It was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance. Jennifer Lopez had a new project to discuss. The View needed their ratings boost, and everyone expected the usual celebrity interview formula. Polite questions, rehearsed answers, a few laughs, and everyone goes home happy. But from the moment Jennifer walked onto that stage, something felt different. The energy was tense, almost electric, like everyone could sense that today wasn't going to go according to script. The other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and the rest of the panel, welcomed Jennifer with their usual warmth. The audience applauded enthusiastically as she took her seat, looking absolutely stunning in a crisp white blazer that seemed to gleam under the studio lights. But Joy Behar, sitting at the far end of the table, had a different energy entirely. Her smile seemed forced, her posture rigid, and there was something in her eyes that suggested she had her own agenda for this interview. The first few minutes proceeded normally enough. Jennifer talked about her latest business ventures, her family, the usual topics that fill these morning show segments. She was charming, articulate, and professional, exactly what you'd expect from someone who's been in the spotlight for over 2 decades. The other hosts asked thoughtful questions, genuinely interested in what she had to say. Jennifer seemed relaxed, even enjoying herself as she shared stories about her work and personal life. But then Joy Behar decided to steer the conversation in a completely different direction. "You know Jennifer?" she said, interrupting a story about Jennifer's production company. "I have to ask you about something that's been bothering me for a while." The other hosts exchanged quick glances, clearly not expecting this shift in tone. Jennifer raised an eyebrow, her smile becoming slightly more guarded. But she maintained her composure. "Of course. What would you like to know?" Joy leaned forward, and her voice took on that particular tone she's known for, the one that signals she's about to go for the throat. "I've been watching your career for years, and I have to say, I'm genuinely curious about how you've managed to stay relevant for so long, despite, well, let's be honest here, your limited vocal range." The studio fell silent. The other hosts looked genuinely shocked. The audience seemed to collectively hold their breath. This wasn't a question, it was an attack, delivered with surgical precision and wrapped in the thinnest veneer of journalistic curiosity. Jennifer's expression didn't change immediately. Years of media training had taught her to maintain composure, even in the face of unexpected hostility. But something flickered in her eyes, a flash of anger that she quickly suppressed. She took a measured breath before responding. "I'm sorry, Joy, but I'm not sure I understand what you're trying to ask me. Are you suggesting that I don't deserve my success?" Joy Behar wasn't backing down. If anything, she seemed energized by Jennifer's response, like a predator sensing weakness. "Well, let's look at the facts here. You've had a few hit songs, sure, but most music critics would agree that your voice is, how should I put this delicately, not exactly in the same league as someone like Whitney Houston or Mariah Carey. And yet somehow you've built this massive career. I'm just wondering how that works." The other hosts were clearly uncomfortable now. Whoopi tried to jump in with a diplomatic comment, but Joy wasn't finished. She continued, "And then there's the acting. You've been in movies, but have you ever really been considered a serious actress? Most of your roles seem to be, well, Jennifer Lopez playing Jennifer Lopez. Don't you think the public deserves more authenticity from their entertainers?" Jennifer's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Her hands, which had been resting casually on the table, now gripped the edge slightly. She was still smiling, but it was a different kind of smile now, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was perfectly controlled, but there was steel underneath the silk. "Joy, I have to say, this is quite a departure from what I was told this interview would be about. But since you want to discuss my career, Let's discuss it properly. She shifted in her chair, turning to face Joy directly, her body language becoming more assertive. You mentioned my vocal range. You're right that I'm not Whitney Houston. Nobody is Whitney Houston, she was one of a kind. But what I am is someone who has worked incredibly hard to build something meaningful. I've sold over 80 million records worldwide. I've had multiple #1 hits, and I've done it by being authentic to who I am, not by trying to imitate someone else. Joy tried to interrupt, but Jennifer wasn't finished. As for my acting, I find it interesting that you would dismiss my work so casually. I've been nominated for Golden Globes, I've worked with some of the most respected directors in Hollywood, and I've helped bring stories to life that have resonated with millions of people. If that's not serious acting to you, then perhaps we have different definitions of what serious means. The tension in the room was palpable now. The other hosts were trying to figure out how to diffuse the situation, but both women seemed locked in this verbal combat, neither willing to back down. Joy, perhaps realizing that her initial attack hadn't landed the way she'd hoped, decided to escalate further. But Jennifer, don't you think there's something to be said for staying in your lane? I mean, you're a singer who acts, an actress who sings, a performer who does business. Some might say you're spread pretty thin. This was the moment when something shifted in Jennifer's demeanor completely. The polite mask slipped just enough to reveal the fire underneath. Stay in my lane? She repeated, her voice dropping to a more dangerous register. Joy, let me ask you something. What exactly is your lane? The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Joy Behar's confident smirk faltered for just a moment, clearly not expecting Jennifer to flip the script so directly. But she recovered quickly, her voice taking on that defensive tone she uses when she feels cornered. My lane? I'm a comedian. I'm a talk show host. I've been doing this for decades. I think I know what my lane is. Jennifer nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful, but her eyes never leaving Joy's face. A comedian. Interesting. And when exactly was the last time you did stand-up comedy? When was the last time you performed in front of an audience that wasn't contractually obligated to laugh at your jokes? The other hosts exchanged nervous glances. This was territory none of them had expected to venture into, and you could feel the entire studio holding its breath. Joy's face flushed slightly, but she pressed on. I don't need to prove my comedy credentials to you, Jennifer. I've been on television longer than you've been famous. I've earned my place at this table through years of hard work and dedication to my craft. Your craft, Jennifer repeated, and now there was no mistaking the edge in her voice. Joy, let me tell you about hard work. Let me tell you about dedication. While you were sitting behind a desk making snarky comments about other people's lives, I was learning choreography until my feet bled. I was taking acting classes, voice lessons, working with dialect coaches, studying with some of the best teachers in the business. I was performing in venues where if you didn't bring your absolute best, the audience would let you know immediately. She leaned forward now, her presence commanding the entire room. You want to talk about staying in lanes? I never stayed in a lane because I refused to let other people limit what I could achieve. Every time someone told me I couldn't do something, I worked twice as hard to prove them wrong. When people said a girl from the Bronx couldn't make it in Hollywood, I made it. When they said I couldn't act, I kept taking roles until I proved I could. When they said I couldn't run a business, I built an empire. Joy tried to interject, but Jennifer, surely you can admit that there's value in focusing on one thing and doing it really well rather than spreading yourself across multiple industries. The laugh that escaped Jennifer's lips was sharp and humorless. Value in focusing on one thing? Joy, you've been doing the same basic job for 20 years. You sit at this table, you read from a teleprompter, you make predictable jokes about political figures, and you occasionally attack guests who come on your show to promote their work. If that's your definition of focus, then I suppose we have very different ideas about what constitutes a successful career. Whoopi Goldberg finally tried to step in, her voice calm but firm. Ladies, perhaps we should take this conversation in a different direction. But Jennifer wasn't finished, and Joy certainly wasn't backing down. Attack guests? Joy's voice rose slightly. I ask the questions that need to be asked. I don't just sit here and lob softball questions so celebrities can peddle their latest projects. Real journalism requires asking tough questions. Jennifer's eyebrows shot up, And for the first time since this confrontation began, she actually smiled, though it wasn't a particularly warm expression. Real journalism? Joy, when was the last time you broke a story? When was the last time you did investigative reporting? When was the last time you did anything that could be considered journalism rather than gossip and opinion? The attack was surgical and devastating. Joy's mouth opened and closed without sound for a moment, clearly struggling to formulate a response. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. I provide commentary. I analyze current events. That's a legitimate form of journalism. Commentary. Jennifer nodded. Opinion. Gossip. Sitting in judgment of other people's work without having the courage to put yourself out there and create something original yourself. She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. Joy, I've been in this business long enough to recognize jealousy when I see it. And what I'm seeing right now is someone who has spent her entire career on the sidelines, criticizing people who actually get in the game. The studio was dead silent now. Even the camera operators seemed frozen in place. Joy's face had gone from flush to pale, and her hands were gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles were white. Jealousy? You think I'm jealous of you? I think you're jealous of anyone who has actually accomplished something beyond sitting at a table and complaining, Jennifer replied smoothly. I think you're jealous of people who take risks, who put themselves out there, who create things that matter to other people. I think you're jealous of anyone who has built something lasting instead of just tearing down what others have built. Joy's voice was shaking now, whether with anger or something else entirely. How dare you come on this show and attack me personally? I invited you here as a guest. I've always been professional with you. Jennifer's laugh was incredulous. Professional? Joy, you started this conversation by insulting my voice, dismissing my acting, and questioning whether I deserve my success. If that's your idea of professional behavior, then I think we need to have a serious conversation about what that word means. She stood up slightly, not quite rising from her chair but changing her posture in a way that made her seem to tower over the table despite still being seated. But you know what the real difference is between us, Joy? When people criticize my work, they're criticizing something I actually created. They're talking about songs I sang, movies I was in, businesses I built, performances I gave. When people criticize you, what exactly are they criticizing? Your ability to read cue cards? Your skill at making mean comments about people who are actually doing things with their lives? Sarah Haynes tried desperately to change the subject. Jennifer, tell us about your upcoming projects. But it was clear that both women were far beyond the point of polite redirection. Joy's voice cracked slightly as she responded. I have provided entertainment and commentary to millions of viewers for decades. I have a loyal fan base who appreciates what I bring to this show. Entertainment, Jennifer mused. Is that what we're calling this? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks more like bullying. It looks like someone who has never had the courage to step into the spotlight using her platform to tear down people who have. Her voice grew stronger with each word, more confident, more commanding. You know what real entertainment is, Joy? It's making people feel something positive. It's bringing joy, bringing escape, bringing inspiration. What you do isn't entertainment, it's just negativity disguised as opinion. Joy's face was now completely red, her composure cracking under the relentless pressure of Jennifer's words. But instead of backing down, she made the fatal mistake of doubling down on her attacks. You want to talk about negativity? You want to talk about bringing people down? Let's talk about how you've built your entire career on selling an image that isn't real. Let's talk about the plastic surgery, the constant reinvention, the way you've manufactured this persona. The moment those words left Joy's mouth, something changed in Jennifer's eyes. If she had been controlled before, calculated in her responses, now there was something primal, something dangerous that had been unleashed. The other host could sense it too. Whoopi actually put her hand up as if to physically stop what was about to happen, but it was too late. Jennifer stood up slowly, her chair rolling back slightly from the force. She wasn't shouting, she wasn't gesturing wildly, but her presence filled the entire studio in a way that made everyone else seem small by comparison. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room with crystal clarity. Joy, she said, and the way she said the name made it sound like a curse. You just made a very big mistake. She placed both hands on the table and leaned forward, her gaze locked on Joy with laser intensity. You want to talk about what's real? Let's talk about what's real. What's real is that I came from nothing and built something extraordinary. What's real is that I've worked harder than you could ever imagine to get where I am. What's real is that millions of people around the world have found inspiration, joy, and escape in the work that I've created. Joy tried to interrupt. I didn't mean to. But Jennifer wasn't having it. No, you did mean to. That's exactly what you meant to do. You meant to tear me down because that's what you do. That's your entire contribution to the world. You sit in that chair, and you diminish other people because it makes you feel better about your own lack of accomplishment. Jennifer's voice was growing stronger, more commanding with each word. But here's what's really real, Joy. Here's what's actually true. You have never created anything that mattered to anyone. You have never inspired anyone. You have never made anyone's life better through your work. The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Joy's mouth was opening and closing, but no words were coming out. The other hosts looked like they were witnessing a natural disaster, fascinated and horrified in equal measure. Jennifer continued, her voice now filling every inch of the space. You know what else is real? The fact that when you go home tonight, you're going to be the same bitter, unfulfilled person you were when you woke up this morning. You're going to be someone whose greatest achievement is sitting at a table and making cruel comments about people who are actually living their dreams. You're going to be someone whose legacy is a collection of petty insults and failed attempts at humor. Joy finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. You can't talk to me like this. This is my show. Your show? Jennifer's laugh was sharp and cutting. Joy, this isn't your show. This is a show that you happen to appear on. You're not the star here. You're barely even supporting cast. You're the person they keep around to say the things that are too mean for anyone else to say, and then everyone can shake their heads and say, oh, that's just Joy being Joy, as if being consistently cruel is some kind of charming personality quirk. She straightened up, towering over the table, her presence absolutely commanding. But you want to know what's really pathetic about all of this? You had an opportunity today. You had Jennifer Lopez, someone who has actually accomplished something with her life, sitting right across from you. You could have had an interesting conversation. You could have learned something. You could have asked about the challenges I've overcome, the lessons I've learned, the things I've discovered about creativity and perseverance, and building something meaningful. Joy was shrinking in her chair now, looking smaller and smaller as Jennifer's words hit their mark with devastating precision. Instead, you chose to be petty. You chose to be small. You chose to waste everyone's time, including your own, by trying to tear down someone who has achieved more in her career than you ever will in your entire lifetime. Whoopi finally found her voice, though it sounded strained. Jennifer, I think maybe we should take a break. But Jennifer wasn't finished. She had one more devastating blow to deliver, and everyone in the studio could sense it coming. You know what the saddest part of all of this is, Joy? It's that you actually had talent once. I've seen your old stand-up routines. You were funny. You had timing. You had wit. You had something to say. But somewhere along the way, you decided it was easier to tear other people down than to build yourself up. You decided it was safer to sit behind this desk and throw stones than to get back out there and risk failing at something that mattered. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Joy's face had gone completely pale, and her hands were shaking visibly now. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about, Jennifer replied, her voice soft but absolutely merciless. I'm talking about someone who gave up on her dreams and now spends her time trying to convince everyone else to give up on theirs. I'm talking about someone who has become so comfortable with mediocrity that she can't stand to be in the same room as excellence. I'm talking about someone who has confused cynicism with wisdom and cruelty with honesty. She picked up her purse from beside her chair, her movements deliberate and controlled. But here's the thing, Joy. Your opinion of me, your attempts to diminish my work, your petty insults, they don't change anything about my life. Tomorrow, I'll still be Jennifer Lopez. I'll still have my career, my family, my success, my happiness. But you'll still be exactly what you are right now. someone whose greatest moment of power is trying to make a guest uncomfortable on a morning talk show. Joy made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. "Security! Get her out of here. She's being abusive and hostile." Jennifer smiled, and for the first time since this confrontation began, it was a genuine smile, though not a particularly warm one. "Abusive? Joy, I've been nothing but honest. If honesty feels abusive to you, maybe that says more about you than it does about me." She turned to address the other hosts, her demeanor becoming instantly warmer and more professional. "Whoopee, Sarah, ladies, thank you for having me on the show. I'm sorry this took such an unexpected turn." Then she looked directly into the camera, speaking to the audience with the charisma and presence that had made her a star. "To everyone watching, remember that no one has the right to make you feel small. No one has the right to diminish your dreams or your accomplishments. Don't let anyone convince you that their limitations should become yours." With that, she walked off the set, her heels clicking against the floor with each confident step. Behind her, Joy sat frozen in her chair, looking like she'd been hit by a truck. The other hosts were scrambling to figure out how to salvage the rest of the show, but it was clear that nothing they said could possibly follow what had just happened. The camera stayed on Joy for just a moment too long, capturing the exact moment when someone who had spent her entire career dishing it out realized she couldn't take it. Her face was a mixture of shock,